Hello, everybody. So got a few things to go over this evening. Um, Perhaps a little scattered. Um, Different topics, but they need to go in here somewhere. We'll look at object-oriented programming, which everything in Python is an object. You'll probably notice that when we import another module, even if the only thing in there are functions, when we import that, we use a dot, just like if it was if we were using one of the class notation sort of operations. Create an instance of the class and then dot data field for that class. We do the same thing when we import modules. That's how we get static objects in Python. Static doesn't show up a whole lot in Python like it does in some of the other languages. It's not a keyword we can use, but static means there's one and only one copy. So for the software development part, instead of the with Python part, we can think of that as when we have a static object, there's only going to be one copy. So that means we can look at the design for the object, not an instance of the object itself, which is important in some places because the very first thing, step number one, which is taken for us in Python, if anybody that's had Java, and you might remember, had public static void main args drilled into your mind there, because we have to actually take that first step. And when we take the first step, there's nothing that exists, so we can't use an object. We don't have any objects yet. So static shows up there. Sometimes in database stuff, that y'all will see in the SDEV 264 or whatever the iOS version is. Every once in a while, they give that a different number. Sometimes they just do mobile app development and do either Android or Apple, whichever the teacher's preference is. And sometimes they give it a different number because Apple stuff does have to be coded in a particular language called Swift. But either way, some of the stuff we do with databases has to be static. We have to set it up before we take the first step in the actual first step in our program. We have to already have that stuff loaded in RAM ready to go. Static has different uses. The thing to remember is when we hear the word static in programming, that's one and only one copy. So usually we look at the design of an object instead of an instance. So somebody who's not muted, I'm going to click mute on whoever's on that phone. I'm not sure who it is. Oh, and actually, it sounds like your microphone's messed up because all I can hear is static. Like whenever you try to talk, it's just coming through really scratchy. So we'll look at that tonight. Project proposals are due in module 3, so I can go over what I was wanting for that. Persistent data is something that needs to work in here. The new statewide core shell doesn't spend a lot of time on that. And that's kind of an important thing. We need to keep our data around. And textbook for this class is kind of like every other textbook. It shows sequential text files. Those are easy. Nice and easy to work with. You all would have seen that in an earlier class. Sequential meaning the order that we store things in is how we organize our data. Right? Basically one line per variable, and then we just read it back in the same order we wrote it, and then we know where all that data got, what variables that data gets loaded back into. Easy to work with, but textbooks only cover those, and those aren't the most common ones. So I like to talk about at least CSV, JSON, and XML. Those are the most common ones. Maybe a little bit of SQL. SQLite is built into every version of Python for many, many years. That's an important thing. It's a very nice relational database. We'll talk about that. But at least CSV, JSON, and XML, those, they're still human readable text files, but kind of some standard formats. And compatibility is a big issue, right? If you switch to a new software, you want to be able to move your old files over. And those three standards, there's a good chance most software that you're familiar with accepts those three things. So software you make should probably be able to import and export those three things. And it's pretty easy in Python. It's a lot more organized. Each of them have their own advantages and disadvantages. There's always advantages and disadvantages, and they're really easy. So usually I include export options for all three of them, plus a custom option to be defined later. But that way I know my software can be compatible with other software. At the very least, you can download the JSON file and upload the JSON file in another comparable piece of software. So it's good to know those standards instead of just the sequential text files. Python, I guess one way to say is Python does not play well with others. Python went to kindergarten, that would be have some pretty lousy marks on the report card. Does not play well with others. Y'all have heard of Unicode encoding, the standard for text. Python doesn't use that. Python strings aren't even compatible with Unicode strings. If you put a B in front of the quote mark, that's how you get it. I know we've seen the F strings, the formatted strings. There's also B strings. B and then some string. That will give you a Unicode string, which is important for compatibility with other software or between other machines. I can't remember if it's tonight, but somewhere there's one of the useful modules or useful Python modules that we're going to look at in one of our weekly modules does have I was going to look at the serial library, and that's how we get things going in and out of the serial port, like a USB port. It's any sort of serial connection, and for that, for working in Python, we probably want something that's compatible with standards like Unicode. It's a lot easier to send Unicode to another machine and know what to do with it when we get to the other side. Or if we're getting information from another machine entirely, it's probably easiest or best just to assume it's going to be Unicode, because that's a standard. But it wasn't the standard when Python was created, and that's never gone back into just. Unicode became the standard after Python was created. Python's older than Unicode. I guess that's the proper way to phrase that sentence. Proper way to phrase the sentence. That's a good little segue into the next thing. Did you all see the announcement about the assignment change? I added a discussion board this module.
Yes, about ChatGPT.
Yes. So that started showing up. We hear about it in lots of conversations, and from some of the conversations I've been hearing with other people, like other teachers and stuff, I started to get the impression some people think that's like a unique, one-of-a-kind piece of software. That's a category. There are thousands of them. It's a chatbot. And it's important to know, keep up on technology. That's something that's useful. So they're not going away as software developers. If anybody's working through that machine learning thing on AWS that I signed you all up for, just if you're interested in that, one of the lessons in there is to make a chatbot. It does not take long. It probably won't be long until I start including that in the classroom anyway, because my estimates on how long that would take is 45 to 75 minutes, which is the perfect length of time for our perspective. That's how much time you would spend with the data analytics, Python cleaning up a database. And then you just leave the machine with a big, huge data set to train for a while, somewhere between 30 hours and 3 weeks. The bigger the data set, the better the chatbot's going to be, basically. Also, as IT students, they're the ones that people are going to ask that question to. Y'all are in IT, you know there's still distinctions, right? The software development program and software developers learn different things than network infrastructure people. People outside of IT don't know that. They hear IT and think IT, right? They'll be like, oh, you have a cybersecurity degree. Well, I have a question. Can you show me how to crop a picture in Microsoft Word? Because a computer is a computer to most people. They'll rank it all together. So you're liable to get some questions about that, and you probably need to be familiar with it. And it's just a powerful tool that software developers are going to be using. That's the one being promoted. That's why people know about it. They've been around for a while. They're great for writing code, because by the structure of ChatGPT, what we're going to talk about in a second, for chatbots creating things like essays, which the one that English teachers all seem to be worried about, the whole using that to create your essay. A chatbot's the wrong tool for that. There's a prompt bot, and that's what you should be using to create a whole essay if that's what you want to do. But a chatbot should be conversation. So for I guess the point I was getting ready to make, jump ahead a little because it fits in the sentence here. For a chatbot, you would have a structure for an essay. Like you'd have the outline and your thesis statement, and you would just make sure the conversation with the chatbot directed that way. Versus a prompt bot, you would just give it your assignment and it spit a whole bunch of stuff out. Which is why I added that other discussion board in as well. That was pulled from the previous SDEV 220 shell. And that is the perfect sort of thing to feed into a chatbot, because that's a conversational thing, right? You cannot give a short answer to that question. If you've looked at what that discussion board I added for module 3 is, there's no possible way that could be a short answer. But that's the perfect sort of thing that you would feed into a chatbot because it leads to a conversation. So to build an essay out of it, well, let's look at it. Oh, is there something in the chat room? Oh, I saw that. That's okay. I understand how that goes there. So chatbots are common, and it is making one is about the perfect size to fit in a homework assignment in a classroom. So moving forward, instead of just this one that's being promoted, is when people realize that's not just a single unique piece of software, that's one of thousands. It's going to probably become something software developers are going to be expected to customize. So in that machine learning thing on AWS, there is a lesson on making a chatbot there. If you want to go through that, it doesn't take very long. It has step-by-step what to do to the database that they give you. And that's most of the work. And that sometimes surprises people, I think. Yeah, my estimates, I can do it in about 20 minutes. So usually for determining how long it would be on a homework assignment, I double that, make that the low end, and then add a little bit. So somewhere between 45 and 75 minutes, 3/4 of an hour to an hour and 15 minutes. That's a good length of time to spend on homework. And it surprises people that it can be made that quick, but we're not inventing it. They certainly didn't invent it that quick, right? And all the libraries exist now. We're just using those libraries. That's why it goes quick. And then we clean up a database, and then we just leave the machine to do its thing while we go get lunch and do the laundry. And one of the reasons that Python grew in popularity is, well, it was always preventing it, because it was early in after Python's creation, it was used quite heavily. An adjunct that's going to start the second 8 weeks here, he did some stuff for the National Weather Service in Python back in the 90s. But Python has always been, it was a slower language. It's very obvious that it's easier than most of our other programming languages. There have been a few developed since then that are even easier than Python because lessons learned, improvements made, and that was over 30 years ago. A lot of lessons have been learned, so there's even easier ones to work with nowadays. But Python was always a little bit slower. All those automated processes that happen in the background. Right? We make it easier for the human by putting the work on the machine. So it just wasn't for time-sensitive things. And speed was a big issue. So back when machines were a lot slower, that was a big deal. As machines got faster and faster, that became less and less of a deal. And then when there was a big breakthrough in machine learning in the early teens decade, I guess the scientists actually discovered it. It was like 2012, but really it takes a couple years for stuff like that to spread. So through the 20 teens, as Python became popular, it was because we were back to something that wasn't time critical. There was a lot of stuff. Machines were getting faster, so our small things were fine. But with machine learning, it's something that we started, if we had our fastest language, C++, optimized as far as ideal as we could get it, we'd still just start the program, walk away, get lunch, go to the laundromat, do some grocery shopping, stop at a coffee shop, and still wait on it when we got done with all those errands. So there's no need to use the fastest language. So the easiest language is definitely is a lot better in that case. This is better for us to work with. And that's what really bumped Python up. And then as it started to take off for those things again, people were like, oh, wait, our machines have gotten a lot faster since the last time we checked this. And it quickly became the most popular language in the world again. But we'll get to the Python amendment. So ChatGPT, you can just search for it. There's some disclaimers here. And it's conversational. This is a very, very heavily trained one. This message has been on here all day, so it might glitch out a little. Hopefully it won't. But we create a conversation with it. So a prompt, like your writing prompt in class might be like something like whoops, where'd my cursor go? What is the history of C++? Sounds like a good start. And it starts giving us starts writing all this stuff out. Very straightforward. It kind of looks like it's doing research there, right? Do not trust this thing. The way they trained it, it will write some great sentences, but part of its training involves social media, and they didn't bother to tell it that that's a bad place to get your information from. So basically, this will cite Facebook. So be careful when it puts information in the stuff it writes out. That's a big one. It was also trained on plagiarism checkers. So like social media, the ones with more approval, more likes, more thumbs up, they put more hearts, they put different names on all the social media sites. Y'all know how that goes. But the higher ranked ones, especially the text-based ones that had a higher ranking, it seems safe to assume those are good sentences, good structure, a structure of words that will appeal to people nicely. So that's part of what they trained it on, looking at those higher ranking text-based posts. Same thing with plagiarism checkers. It went through all the plagiarism checkers, and sentences that are commonly plagiarized, right? People, students at a school go to the same library website, and the top often enter the same search results or similar search results, so they're going to see similar articles. So some sentences are going to be more plagiarized more often than others. And once again, it seems a fairly safe assumption that the sentences that get plagiarized most often are probably really good sentences. Just a really good way to put the words together to express the point. So that's what they trained this bot on. But they didn't bother to tell it that that's a bad thing. So there's a disclaimer on the homepage to be careful with the information it gives you because of that. You all know what's wrong with citing Facebook, right? You wouldn't use something you saw on Facebook in a research essay, but ChatGPT will. So watch out for things like that. That's kind of the first one. But we got that sentence, right? Not a whole essay. And that's part of the reason I wanted to include it. This is a tool, so moving forward, you should probably see the proper way to use this. A prompt bot is the one that would write the entire essay. I think English teachers don't know those exist. They've been talking about ChatGPT so much. I don't see any need to point that out to them. They're not going to be happy when they learn about it, as they learn about the other guy. But for chatbots, it's conversational. So just putting in your prompt isn't enough, right? It's like, what's the history of C++? To get that like a conversation. If you ask one of your friends that, they can give you a quick rundown. But then you need to continue the conversation to see what you're learning. So maybe you're writing for an essay. What makes the difference between a report and an essay? A history report, you have a bunch of dates and list out when things happened and the order they happened in or something, but it's just the list of dates. That's a report. An essay is making a point, supporting a claim. You're going to say something like, you're going to use all those history dates to support a claim you're making, like maybe improvement in transportation since the Industrial Revolution versus here's the date trains were invented, here's the date cars were invented, here's the date planes were invented. That's a report. And then an essay is like transportation has skyrocketed, has become immensely better since the Industrial Revolution, and then use those dates to support that idea. So with a chatbot, what you want to do to put your essay together is you don't want to just put in the prompt. Like that would be what the first one is. You you still want to have an outline, the structure, the organization. This is a programming class. Think of it like an algorithm. And to have something like this write your code, it's a mindless machine. They're getting better, but when you see how to put them together, it's a mindless machine. Things like the fact that it will cite Facebook and plagiarize without any qualms and act like it didn't do that shows the artificial part of the AI. It doesn't. Yeah, I'm going to get into the weeds on chatbots there. It's still a machine. We're the intelligent ones. A human, as far as programming, is only needed to put the algorithm together. Machines are way better at typing than us. And that's where stuff like this comes in useful. Same thing on your essay. You can put the structure, the organization, sort of an outline. What order is it going to go in? What's your thesis? What claim are you supporting? And then steer the conversation with the chatbot that way. So maybe you want to, your essays, not just the history of C++, but C++ is the best language for beginners to start with. Right? You want to make that claim and support it. And then you steer the conversation that way. So as you ask questions, make claims, it is conversational. You don't just have to ask questions. So like, is C++ a good language for beginners? And this has been glitching out all day. They've had this message popping up all day today saying that having network trouble and they're improving it. I gotta get the Zoom thumbnails out of the way on the DVDs. Versatile programming language. How much these are be more difficult to learn? Yeah. So that doesn't really support the claim, right? Might have to adjust the prompt. Are there any advantages to starting out to learning per? So rephrase the question. Right? Y'all all know that how that works from just conversation in life. Right? If somebody doesn't give you the answer that you're expecting or go somewhere else, you can rephrase the question and get different answers. It's just like that. And that's what you need to do to use the tool properly. That's one of the main things I wanted to do was make sure and show how to use the tool properly. People will ask you questions. And yeah, there at the end, that's the biggest claim to starting with C++. Every other language we have is somehow a descendant of C++. There are other languages that exist from before then, but everything we would actually use in the modern world was either created with C++, or in the case of Python, it was created with something that was created with something that was created with C++. It's down that line. We follow those patterns. It's and so if you learn that one first, it's a strong foundation. Any other language that you're going to use in our modern world, unless you go for like the obscure COBOL programmer because it still exists, so there needs to be 50 of them in the world and guarantee a paycheck that way. But it's a language developed in the early 60s, so you probably don't really want to program in that. It's just a guaranteed paycheck for the 50 or 60 people in the world that still know it. The C++ gives us strong foundations in programming concepts, and it increases job prospects automatically because everything is, as at the very least, it follows C++ syntax. Right? We use the dots in Python. We use the parentheses at the end of our function. It's cleaned up. Most of those languages I just mentioned, those exist because some really, really good programmers that knew C++ really, really well sat down and used it to make another language. And there's really, really good reasons why they did that. We have unrestricted control. On the other hand, we have complete unrestricted control. Like in Java, the way I always pointed out is we don't lose any capabilities. We gain warning messages. we can't inadvertently destroy our machine without at least ignoring a warning message that says you're going to destroy your machine if you run this code. With C++, the machine will just start running it and destroy itself. Yeah, was that Dave?
Okay, sorry. So, how do we need to cite any of this, or is there a way to cite? Because I mean, it doesn't look like it even says where the information is coming from.
The social media thing.
Pardon me?
If somebody posts something on social media and you don't believe them, you're going to ask that question I just typed in there, right?
Okay. Oh, do you have a? Oh, okay. I just seen that.
So ChatGPT, no. But it has a really nice way of saying it. But it recommends some places to start looking. So you would still want to confirm the things. And that's what I was saying. In the future, they're going to keep building on this one for a while. They're everybody's super happy with it. That's why they started promoting it as a public thing. And if you read through their goals, they want robots are going to be doing this soon. All our machines are going to be doing this soon. It's not going to be just giving Alexa and Google Assistant orders. It's going to be like Rosie from the Jetsons. So they want people to start. The goal of it is to start getting used to that, interacting with it like it's another intelligent creature, not just a machine to give orders to. So it's going to be building for a while, but they're not going to go back to the drawing board, so they won't be able to remove that thing like don't cite Facebook, don't plagiarize. Those have to be removed before at the beginning of the training model, so they can't retrain it without that, basically. So you'll get sentences like this. They can't cite it, but it's a great writer, so there will probably be better keywords to put in your search to find a good source. Right? When it writes out the sentences, there'll be some, does that make sense, Dave?
Oh, sorry. I'm looking at the Wikipedia link you have in the discussion.
Oh, I was just, the way it writes really good, it's gonna have some nice keywords to search for nice sources that you might not have thought of the first time.
Okay.
So another use for that tool. And that's why I wanted to just require it. I guess a lot of places are trying to block it, but was a good example. I'll use the same one I used this afternoon. I was trying to think of another one quickly, but whenever pottery was invented, there was probably a lot of people that raised a fuss about that new technology that was ruining civilization, right? 12,000 years ago, it's like, young kids aren't going to know how to make tools out of stone. They're doing everything the easy way with shaping it with mud and then firing it. There were surely people that raised the same fuss back then. It's a tool. It's not going away. We're programmers. Making a chatbot is something that is easily the size of a weekly homework assignment in a programming class. I've already started planning that. It's in the optional stuff this semester, but y'all are already signed up for that. If you're interested in it, one of those optional things I put there for you is to make a chatbot. It does not take long. It's something that's here. It's a tool that's going to stick around. So we need to be familiar with it. We need to know how to use it properly. That's the big thing. Take time to learn to use it properly. So in I did the HTML class first, and I just replaced the big writing assignment. Put that in the big writing assignment. And the rest of the classes this semester, it's in a discussion board. That way y'all can come back and analyze it. So your replies are like talking about how well it did. What you think about it, what could be better, what could be worse. And notice there is the thumbs up and thumbs down button. It's still learning. When it gives us a really good, like this one, when we ask for the source. Oh, I'm looking at the wrong mouse. I was looking at the TV and trying to hit the wrong. We can hit thumbs up, and then that knows that's a good answer. Because how machine learning works, it's really weighted averages. Everybody's seen a weighted average? GPAs are the standard example. We don't just add up the numbers and divide by how much they cost or sales stuff. If you're selling things marketing, you have hats and t-shirts and hoodies. They're all going to have different prices. So when you find your averages, you need to include the price and the quantity you sold. That's sort of weighted average. That's what machine learning is based off of. Many deep layers of it, but it's a powerful tool. We have it at our disposal. As IT students, people are going to ask you questions about it. So at least for that reason, you need to be familiar with it. It's not going away. You need to learn to use it properly. And like I was saying earlier, a chatbot is actually the wrong tool to just enter a prompt. There's something called a prompt bot, but we don't need to rush and let the English teachers know about that. So they're freaking out about it. Chatbot's enough. A chatbot needs to be a conversation. A human still has to do the plan. Or if you have a chatbot, write your code. You still have to put the algorithm together. It just does the typing for you. But machines are better than humans at typing. Machines never make typos, which is what's going on here. And like when the thing that worries people and the reason it shows up in so many conversations, the machine's never going to make a typo in an essay. That's one easy way to spot a human type one versus a machine type created essay. If there's no typos, there's a pretty good chance the machine did it, because the human's going to make a typo along the way. So our textbooks get up to like 15th edition and stuff, right? And every one of those editions had a team of professional editors, people whose expertise was doing nothing but looking for typos, and they still miss them. So machines are kind of better at typing, and you just want to get familiar with it. And at the very least, know it's there. Don't just hear about it, actually go out and use it, which is sort of the standard for technology anyway. You get out there and use those things, give them a try. I'll let you all mess with that. And yeah, put it in the discussion board. So the replies in the discussion board are to sort of analyze how that goes through.
Hey, Chris, one last question on that. So for the first link, there's no section numbers. I do see that on the second test-driven development, there's like 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And I think in the discussion, it says 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. But on the first link, there's bullet points. Is that what you want us to read, the bullet points, or is it these sections like fault and failures, or economics, roles, history, or just all of it?
What are you looking at?
Oh, I was looking at the instructions for the discussion. It says enter the URLs below and read sections 1, 3, 4, 6, and 7 from the first URL. And then
You can just jump down to the prompt.
the prompt. Let me see.
Scroll down and you get to the point you actually want to write about. You can read that stuff if you want. I just copied and pasted it from the old shell. There's
Okay.
information there, useful reading assignments, but you're not writing the post, so you don't necessarily need to read those details about writing the post.
Okay.
Yeah, the section just for the prompt. I just copied and pasted that whole thing because it was, well, the only discussion board we have left is just a definition thing. And ChatGPT wouldn't be a good example of that. I think it's module 5. You can look at that. There's like 3 things that says, define this, define this, define this. That's not the sort of stuff you want to ask a chatbot. You want to waste a chatbot's resources on. So I went and found that one that the only way we can answer that question, you go look at it, if that's the sort of question that could only be a conversation. There's no short answer to that, right?
Right.
So I chose that one because that's the perfect sort of thing to interact with a chatbot with. Get that conversation going. And it doesn't have to be one question, right? You don't have to just put that in there and get the answer. You can do like you would for an essay. That's the idea for the conversation. But
And then we're just gonna copy and paste each section that it answers us into the discussion.
Yes.
Ooh, I'm scared of that plagiarism thing. That's why I said, how do I cite it? I guess I'm so scared of getting information and not citing it.
Yeah, I know where it's coming from. I specifically asked you to get it from that one place, so
Okay.
that is an implied citation. Okay. is the assignment said, go here. So that, but have a conversation, compare it, take that whole prompt and put it in there. Versus if that happened and you wanted to strike up a conversation with one of your friends looking for advice, you probably wouldn't give that whole paragraph.
Right.
You lead into the conversation, do it both ways and compare and contrast. Learn to use the tool, that's what it's about. And then it's in a discussion board, so share what you learn with your classmates and interact. And it's a powerful tool that's not going away.
All right, I'm looking forward to it. Thanks.
Yes, yeah, there's definitely some usefulness about it, but it's showing up everywhere. So at the very least, since you all are IT students, I can just about guarantee you that you are going to get asked questions about it. But really, that's the promotion. I think that's how they decided to promote it. Before anybody ever created an essay with it, they just probably published an article that said people are using it to create essays, and then a bunch of students learned they could do that. But I trust you. Let me put it that way. I trust you. You're an honest person. You're not going to use that dishonestly or to the extreme. Other way, it wouldn't really matter, because the dishonest person would probably go find that on their own. So
We should, since we have the same prompt, we should kind of come up with similar, depending on how we put the information into the chat bot. I guess like if we put the whole prompt in there, I'm sure we'll get, some crazy stuff. But if we were to not warm it up, but like you said, just ask it. Do we have to ask it in the exact same way, or can we ask the same kind of sentence in our lingo? You know how somebody might ask one question one way and get another.
Like, I'm pretty sure Deshaun was the first one to do that, and I'm pretty sure he just copied and pasted that prompt in there because he's already done that before. He's done that stuff with it in a new technology report in the past, so he knew how to use it. So he didn't say how he used it, but if he put that whole prompt in there, if you do the same thing, compare your response to his.
Okay.
Or lead in the conversation. Try different things.
I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna try different ways.
Think about conversation. The goal of the reason they're releasing it and promoting it, trying to do what they can to make everybody at least take a look at it, is think about how we just bark orders at Alexa versus Rosie from the Jetsons, right? Like a family member. Machines.
And you said that we can learn how to do. You said in the AWS learning course, there's an assignment to learn how to code it. You said.
There's a chat bot.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Chris.
Your chat bot won't be as nice as that.
I'm sure.
Massive amounts of fun for that one particular one. They had massive amounts of funding. They've already spent years training that one, right? You'll probably only spend a couple hours. You'll find a data set where you spend a couple hours training it. Right. You do all your work and then you leave it to train for a couple hours, and then you come back and grade it on how well it did.
Okay. All right. Looking forward to it. Thanks.
It's a useful tool. You will see it. So however, you might as well include it in the class and cover it properly and see how to use it. And that structure, that's the big thing. The human still needs to organize the essay. The human still needs to come up with a thesis, figure out what claim you're going to make, and then use that conversation to put together the pieces of it. Use the claim and the organization to steer the conversation with the chatbot. Use the thesis and the outline to steer the conversation with the chatbot. I think I said the word conversation too many times there. But anyway, give it a try. See what it's like, what you like, don't like about it, because it's easy to make chatbots, so we can make your own. You can include the parts you like and not include the parts you don't like about it. Make little changes. So one thing here I wanted to pull up. For those who haven't had me in class before, I prepare ahead of time, right? Usually up here writing code goes really, really smoothly. And I think by this point, you all know writing code doesn't go that smoothly. There's typos happen, little glitches in the algorithm we thought would work ahead of time that end up not working. Sometimes we make mistakes that work better than what we thought was going to work. Little glitches like that happen, and I don't want to waste our class time because that's very restricted. So I do prepare ahead of time. And the other day, the example I was looking at, was on my other computer, which I forgot to tell it not to go to sleep after the last factory reset. So I had to enter a big long password, and it was the second example on decorators. There's tonight's example. That's what we're going to talk about next. The one I was looking at the other day, though, was what I did in this class in spring 2022. So I was over on GitHub, and since that second example, the one where I put in the timing didn't work, I was going to pull up. I did want to point this one out if anybody was, because that's a useful thing. So here's the timing that I was trying to copy from, and then this computer went to sleep. And when I let it, got a little typo or something, it did not quite work. It was later in the semester last time, so we'd already looked at multi-threading and parallel processors by then. So I guess I did have to modify it slightly. That's why I made a mistake, and then I stopped looking at the screen and the computer went to sleep and I couldn't get back up to find the typo. But let me put this in the chat room if anybody was following along the other day and wants to correct that one that's there. This right here is just a second. You'll notice there's two start and stop points. You don't need the second start and stop point for taking times. So I copy that, and where's my buttons? The disappearing buttons on Zoom are like two disappearing. Uh-oh, that didn't get line breaks in it. Let me do this instead. The whole core idea of the internet, instead of sending you the data, I'll just send you the link to the data and you can go get it if you want. That's from last example, and you'll notice there's a second start and stop, which is obviously has to do with multiple processors. So just ignore those lines to take times for now. We'll see parallel processing and multi-threading week 6 or 7 near the end. So tonight's example, I'll go ahead and switch back over to that on the screen, and I changed that setting so now that computer is going to stay awake till the battery dies, the way they should. I don't need a computer that goes to sleep. So next thing I wanted to look at was introduce well, it was probably an introduction to a new word last week, right? Or not last week, Monday. We saw list comprehensions and generator comprehensions, which kind of took the place of the range function. It filters down a data set for us ahead of time. Our example, we created a list by looking at another list or looking at the range function, which is a generator basically. And that goes directly into a list and we're ready to use it. And that word comprehension is what they had in common. And so there is also something called a generator. Okay, there it goes. So I'll start up Spider and let's look at generator, which is a special type of function. Even the other day in the previous class, the book you used there, because I know what book you used in that previous class, says there's 2 types of functions, void functions and return functions. And voids do return something. Voids return none, which you're past the classes that have introduction in the name somewhere. So none does count as something. When you get to mobile app development, that will be very important for your asynchronous multi-threading, that you need to use void with the capital V, the object version of void. We don't really have that in Python. Most of our other languages have nice naming conventions that we always follow. So that's something you'll see that it is a data type. It's not a lack of electricity in our RAM chip, right? There's still something in the RAM chip. None and, well, I'll use void and null. That's because in some of our C family languages, we do actually distinguish between them. But that's two types of emptiness, right? Null, void, which in Python, both of them are included in none, but those are two different data types, like integers and floats. They're both numbers, but they're not the same type of number. Same thing with none and, oh no, cancel that. Cancel. Don't update right now. Uh-oh, hopefully that's not gonna be a problem. I meant to click no, don't update, and it did that, but I clicked yes. Hopefully it's not gonna stop in the middle of something. But there is a third type that we have in Python. After closing, cool, get that option. That's nice. Usually I do a factory reset before an update on the machine. In fact, I do factory resets every semester, sometimes twice a semester, in like spring break or fall break. So we have a nice clean computer to start off the next class with. So the third type of function is what's called a generator function. And it's similar to a return, but a return happens at the end. With generators, things happen over and over again. So for the example, I was gonna, well, first off, import math. And if I print this, print math.py. No real surprises there, right? I'm sure y'all, even if you hadn't seen it before, you know, you probably, it's obvious that pi is a constant that's included in our programming language. What is this? This is going to be generate. Generate.py. No surprises here. If we run that, we get the digits of pi. And let's think about a range function, right? Y'all have used that in for loops a lot in the previous class. I assume you have. I see head nods in the classroom. It usually goes nice in order, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Maybe that's not the order we want to go in. Maybe we want these numbers right here. That's not going to fit nicely in a range function. But we need to do something in a for loop for those. So I'm going to store this somewhere. I'll just P equals cast that as a string. So, well, what's already printed out, if I printed it out, we wouldn't be able to tell the difference. Right? There's 16 digits of pi, which is, we'll get us some decent accuracy. There's improved versions we can use. There's more than just the 16-digit version of pi built into Python. And if we go to other libraries, there's way, way more than that. Different things, but that'll work for our purposes now. So maybe we want to do something with those digits. It wouldn't be a problem except for that second one, right? That's not a digit. Everything else is. So if we had a function that just looked at that as a string, discarded that decimal point, and then returned the integer portion one at a time, we'd have a nice way to look at the digits of pi and place.
So why are you storing that as a string and not a float or an integer?
Oh, to parse through it. Remember the word parse? I mean, look at some text and pull the parts we need out of text.
Oh, gotcha.
So the reason I went to text, I guess I did that out of order, is to get rid of that decimal. And as a floating point number, how would I get those one digit at a time? If it was a really big whole number, I could use modulus and divide by 10 and keep grabbing the next column. That's a little harder to do with floats. We have to use all those decimal points. But basically the same thing, you just need one. You need tenths instead of 10, but you have to do a lot of modification. But with a string is always an array of characters. So we can just look at characters one at a time and adjust it for that. Not the only way to do it. That's just what I thought would be easiest, Tiff. Whenever I did that, it's like,
Well, that definitely makes sense.
I can turn that into a string, get rid of that decimal point, and then turn each digit individually back into an integer. That's the logic here. So let's put that in a function so we can do something with it. Oops. Put that there. Type over here. On the side, I can zoom in and can everybody see that okay? I can zoom in on that side. I can't zoom in on the console. I need to go in and change that in the properties. I have to actually change the font size on that one. I'll define a function called pi digits. This was just an example I could think of that was similar to the range function, but not the numbers in order. And we have repeats and stuff, right? If we look at the first 16 digits of pi, if you just quickly glance at it, what digit shows up the most? Should see a bunch of nines, right? Without going there to counting them. Like, oh, looks like 9 shows up quite a bit, and so does 5. But yeah, if there was a pattern in pi, you would know about. People have looked for patterns in pi for years. And we just have those digits. We can get more. But if we grab all of those, where'd my example go? Didn't do anything fancy. I'll just walk through it. And with counter controlled loops, the thing that you would do for I in range, I've been using Python since before the range function was there. So I always do that as a while loop. It usually doesn't cross my mind that I could use range until later, because I was kind of comfortable with what I was doing in Python before the range function was created. Or use a generator to create one. I would just use a generator to, while I is less than 50, whatever parameter was passed in, loop through there, and then you have a nice little generator. Just create a range function real quick. I wanted to do something a little different than that. So I'll start at 0, and while I is less than the length of that string. Oh, this is another reason to use strings, because with a string, also have length of the string. We're going to have length of a floating point number. Even though it's a definite number of bits stored over in the RAM chip, we can't easily grab the length of that floating point number. So while we're less than that string, we can just check if it's numeric. Has everybody seen this before? String character I, the ith character in the string. It's a string, so we have the is numeric to see if it's a number. First, the only thing in pi that's not a number is that decimal point. So we should get every other digit by itself. Everybody seen is numeric? We have a whole bunch of those. Is none, is alphanumeric to get rid of special characters. Maybe it is alpha. I haven't done that one in a while, but there's one that just letters. There's a whole bunch of those is something on all our strings that we can use. Is numeric is definitely the one that shows up most often, though. That's usually what we're checking for. Or at least in my experience, that seems to be what gets checked for most often. So if it is numeric, we want to return it. But return would be the end of it, right? We'd hit that 3 at the beginning of the string and return. And when we return from our function, it's done. So instead of returning, we say yield. Yield that character. And I'm going to go ahead and cast it here. If I haven't explicitly stated it yet, those who haven't had me in class before, I usually do things in that order. It's kind of working from the inside out, right? Top to bottom, left to right, that's the order the computer needs it in. But it's very, very rare that that's the order we think about it in. It can be a lot more productive to bounce around and put your code together in the order you think about it in. And it just needs to be in that certain order for the computer at the end. That way you don't have to adjust stuff ahead of time. You're just bouncing back and forth. And we have a mouse and arrow keys. We can put the cursor wherever we want very, very easily, and just pay attention to the order it needs to end in. I spelled yield wrong, didn't I? There we go. I spelled that correctly. And now we can still keep doing stuff. Now we can get down to our increment I statement. Increment I by 1, so that we keep going through that loop and eventually go the whole length of that string. And we're yielding the number each time. So now we'll come down and put in that guard statement. That way, if we import that into someplace else, our test case isn't going to automatically run. That's the big thing about guard statement. We looked at that the other day. We're going to have test cases for all of our things, but we don't want that test case to run every time we import it. Or some things we do want to run. If anybody's used Pygame, you've seen that every time you import Pygame, first thing you get is a message. So that would go outside of the guard statement to make sure that it does run whenever it gets imported. Because that sort of thing can be useful at times too. And now we can do some stuff with this. So down here in the guard statement, I'm going to add some white space first real quick. Type pass, so my cursor goes at the end, and then adding white space. But that's just a personal preference. I don't like typing at the bottom of a screen, so really, it bothers me for some reason. I know there's nothing wrong with it, but so maybe we could do a little loop through those and print out asterisks. Like, okay, let's see if we can see them. We want to look for patterns in pi, right? That's the sort of thing people always do. Like, okay, looking at the digits isn't helpful. Let's actually print out a pattern. So now we can use that generator, and this is the same way we use the generator comprehension, which does it all at once. I guess this one should have been shown first, because the generator comprehension is a condensed version of this. But let's say for I in pi digits, what do we need to do? I guess we need to loop through again. Not a loop. So we're going to start with 0. And I'll create a line that starts as a blank string. I was going to do the star patterns. Has everybody done an assignment like that before, where they're like, draw a pyramid with stars, draw a triangle, write the word high out with that by placing asterisks, stars. I'm a math person. In math, we call that a star. It's much easier to say, especially when it gets plural. So I'm going to do one of those. So while j is less than I, is that the right way? Yep. We'll start at 0 and go up to whatever digit we're in. So the first digit's a 3. So we'll go 0, 1, 2. Second digit's a 1, so we'll go 0. And just walk up to that so we can, and each time through line, we'll do the concatenation reassignment with an asterisk. And then increment j once that little box that was hoping to be useful gets out of the way. Then we can print that out. Print line. And go away box. Oh, whoops. Sorry, we don't have plus in this language, do we? Plus equals 1. We'll increment j by 1. Does the logic on that make sense? And see how it's just an alternative to what you're all used to doing for range functions. We don't need the numbers in order. We need the digits of pi. Let's see what happens. So I'll save that, and when it prints out, we get those different lines looking for a pattern. There are lots of patterns that show up, right? If we have 2 boxes, we have 2 balls. I guess that works better if you have 2 basketballs, or a basketball and a tennis ball, and tennis ball is sitting there, and you roll the basketball so that it hits the tennis ball, bounces off the wall, bounces back, hits the basketball. The basketball is bigger, so it's going to keep rolling. The number of times that that tennis ball hits something, whether it's the basketball or the wall, is going to be the digits in pi. So we have patterns like that in pi, which is why people obsess over it and search for it. Doesn't make any sense. And also that works with flat boxes. You're like, a sheet of ice, I guess you can think of it that way, and push a big box against a small box, that big box is going to keep moving towards the wall, and that small box bounces back and forth. And the number of times it hits is going to match the digits of pi. So we know lots and lots of patterns. If you look at how a river, actually the distance of a river travels with all those curves and measure the straight line distance, it's very close to a multiple of pi between the distance. It shows up all over the place in the universe. So people have obsessed over that number a lot. So it's something that might show up in a program, right? You might want to use that instead of just the nice little sequential orders. Sharkovsky ordering. I guess I don't need to get into that too much. Especially when you get up in chaos theory, non-dynamical linear systems. 1, 2, 3, 4 is not a good order for the numbers to go in. 1, 2, 4, 8, all the multiples of 2 are a much better order, especially if we follow those up by all of the multiples of 2, powers of 2 multiplied by an odd number in decreasing range, which that's a complicated thing, but that makes 3 our smallest number. Or sorry, 3 is the biggest number. That really applies to something, but it's a much better order to put things in if you're going to work in nonlinear dynamic systems or chaos theory. Because of how things happen, how bifurcations happen. If we keep doubling things, the least likely thing to ever happen is 3. We can get cancellation, but for everything to cancel back to a 3 when all we did was double stuff, that's pretty much impossible. So there's different orders that our numbers can go in, and patterns and things like that. It's useful for that. What's another? What happened in the example? I also did. I remember what this was. I didn't make any notes when I was getting ready, but maybe we want to know where a certain digit shows up. Where does 7 show up? Where's the first place 7 shows up in the digits pi? So we'll start at 0 so we can count them. For I and pi digits, or a p might have been a better index value there, right? I is just our common one to go with. We can just look and see if we have a 7. And I started at 0 just out of habit, but I want to think first, second, third, fourth, which digit of pi is it? So I'm going to increment first. Counter plus equals 1 instead of increment last, and then just check if it's a 7. If I is, not minus. If I is equal to a 7, then print out counter. I think that'll stop there. I think in 16 digits of pi, I only have 1 7, but that would print out maybe all the 7s every time we get a 7. So it shows up in our 14th digit. Well, I have 16 digits of pi, so with the default one in Python. Does that give you some ideas on how you could use that? If you have something different than just your numbers in order, the range function like you're used to, you make up something different to walk through. And that's what generator comprehensions that we saw the other day are the one-line version of that. You just need that keyword yield. What are you sending back? And instead of return. Otherwise, it's just like your regular functions. So you may have questions about that. Definitely give that a try. Lecture's going to be a little on the shorter side this evening, so there's plenty of time to do stuff because we ran long the other day trying to get through all that Django stuff, first pass through that, which was quite overwhelming, right? Remember, there was only 3 things we made up the name for. So it is exactly that every time, which makes it easy to remember because we didn't make any very many modifications. We only chose the name of things 3 times. And consistency makes it easy to remember those after just a few passes. Okay, that brings us up to a good pause point. part of the reason I was stretching that out, because next thing is, so we, a nice little break point between this and starting to talk about object-oriented programming, which Python only does object-oriented stuff, so it's not like we haven't done object-oriented stuff, but seems like a good time for a break. It's about halfway through what I had planned for this evening. Does anybody have any questions about that so far? Okay, 10 minutes sound good? My laptop says 7:07, so we'll get back to it at 7:17. I'll see y'all in just a moment.